Do you believe me? I'm in the middle of Europe, screwing a Volkswagen 1200. Yes, folks, check your 4x4 periodic table for LVT, because we're doing the element of crime.
Woo!
That's cinema, baby.
No, Mr. Wilson. I don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone.
That's right, you don't. How about going outside and trying to kick me around?
I'm not supposed to fight with the guests, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a guest tonight, you yellow bastard. I happen to be an intruder.
Hello, and welcome to The Good, the Pod, and the Ugly, a film podcast where we pair movies to garner a better understanding of the filmographies of notable directors or actors. Typically one actor or creator per season, often with guests. I am your co-host, Ken.
I guess this is Thomas. My initials are on my generic ball cap, and I've crossed out the word police for my Volkswagen Bug.
And we are joined by Jack.
Hi.
Oh,
And
eventually
Jack-
we'll be joined by once provisional and now full-time, but going back very soon to provisional co-host Ryan.
it's 2025. We had Ryan on for an entire year, 2024, and he was great. Hot takes.
Okay, we won't be having that problem anymore, if you know what I mean.
And we're in the middle of recording, Ryan. We were trying to cover for you, but welcome back to provisional status. That lasted exactly no episode. Yeah, so who are we talking about this season? What are we doing?
Okay, so we're doing 4x4, and this is where we do 4 films by 4 directors, and each of us pick the director, and we try and find 4 films within sometimes super big, broad filmographies to kind of condense everything about them within 4 films. We started with Robert Aldrich, which I picked, then we went Tsai-Ming Liang, which Jack picked, and then Big Willie, William Wyler, that Ryan picked, and we are now on LVT, picked by Thomas.
Yeah, Lars Von
Back in the
Trier.
LVT.
Woo!
I'm glad that Jack stuck around to talk about this Danish director who was born April 30th, 1956. Had a few acting gigs, mainly television, as a child. His parents were really hands-off, and it led to him having a sense of anxiety that he will later, as a director, channel into a lot of his work.
Really? Wow. I get the feeling that Jack has feelings.
Yeah, so Thomas, when you first brought up Lars Von Trier, I had like this, oh man. But now revisiting some of his earlier work, I'm like, oh yeah, I couldn't remember why he was such a big deal. Why did you choose him for your director? And tell us about the 2 films we're pairing first off.
Yeah, I love giving my generational cohort Jack a hard time. It's something that we Zoomers do. We chide each other. And so he found a slow cinema person who I did not like their films very much. And so now I get to subject him to 4 Lars Von Trier films, starting off with his first movie, Element of Crime, and the last movie of his second trilogy, Dancer in the Dark.
So this is all punishment for
Uwe Boll?
No, for Last Days? Is that?
Oh boy, I think no, you still have UA Bull punishment coming.
I think these 4 directors we picked this season, though, I mean, it seems like they're paired off where Aldrich and Wyler kind of fit as a type of director, but spans slightly different era. And Lars Von Trier predates Tsai-Ming Liang, but they're both international directors, better known as, Lars Von Trier is a provocateur. Tsai-Ming Liang mostly in the film festival circuit and the niche filmography fans.
Yeah,
so it's a great mix.
Lars Von Trier is a giant fan of Tarkovsky.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be a little bit of that in there.
Certainly in the movie we're talking about this week. Yeah.
Element of Crime. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'll just give you a little bit about him. Like he shot a bunch of just amateurly shot 16 millimeter films, got into film school, and when he turned 25, added the Von to his name. He was Lars Trier prior to that. And I believe as I've seen, at least of 2016, he's never stepped foot in the United States because he's terrified of flying.
Oh, is that right?
Guns.
Shocking after seeing Dancer in the Dark and its rigorous adherence to American actors.
Especially Washington State.
Yeah, which I have a little bit of experience in.
Yeah. Initially really thought of his films as a trilogy and saw a little bit of as a hack, maybe in both sense of like a biohack, but also cheap writing, in that he could just kind of write the same story again. He says that, but his film that will follow Element of Crime, Epidemic, doesn't quite fit to my mind. But yeah, he would do what he would call his Europa trilogy, and he'd follow that with the Golden Heart trilogy, which would include Breaking the Waves, The Idiots, and then Dancer in the Dark.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Europa. He actually had a movie called Europa, right?
He did. It actually goes by two different names, and his Zentropa was the other title for it. And that will be the name of his production company that he started. We'll talk a little bit more probably next week, on next episode, when we start to talk a little bit more about Dogma films and how he got started.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, he sees a little provocateur. He doesn't like following rules necessarily, and he bumped up against a lot of things in film school because they told him you could never do a flashback and never do voiceovers, which Element of Crime is a big middle finger to. And then like the 180 degree rule, that axis, he never liked it. And he says that that's really antiquated. It goes back to the time when people got scared in the theater by a tilt, thinking there was an earthquake in the theater. The train was coming at him. And so, yeah, he likes to do time cuts, especially whenever he's doing DV video. It's redundant. Doing digital video, and he can do quick cuts, which we'll talk about a lot more next week with the 100 cameras technique.
Yeah, yeah. This interesting comparison between the two of how formal the Element of Crime is that you expect a European quasi-art movie to look, compared to his evolution to that Dogma 95 look that he has in Dancer in the Dark.
Yeah. He tries to often upset himself and put challenges in his own way, which is what all Dogma 95 is about.
Yeah,
you want to run down his films to see, or if you've only seen a few, maybe we'll just go through the ones we have seen
of Von Trier
table setting. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've seen Melancholia, Antichrist, Dogville, Dancer in the Dark, obviously. I watched half of the first part of Nymphomaniac and Breaking the Waves.
Part one, or the first half of part one?
First half of part one, first quarter. I've seen Europa, The Kingdom, Element of Crime, obviously. I really like The Kingdom, his TV show that he made. The first season is fantastic. Yeah, so I was kind of the early wave and then petered out around Dogville. I was like, well, this guy, like you were just saying, all the stuff that makes him uncomfortable and whatnot, he's more about an idea of pushing buttons sometimes. And within certain scenes, I really like him, but overall, the concepts just got annoying to me. Like, how many times? I mean, after the Golden Heart trilogy, I mean, Breaking the Waves and Dancer in the Dark are not a very pleasant double feature, although I think one of them is better than the other one. How about this movie, though?
I can talk about the movies that I've seen of his.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen The Element of a Crime before. The Kingdom must have been the first thing of... No, I did see Breaking the Waves. I saw The Kingdom. I'd seen part of Dancer in the Dark before. And I really fell off it's going to be interesting to cover him. I fell off of him. I didn't really have any interest until Antichrist again, and then Antichrist and Melancholia. I really, really love. And after seeing Element of Crime, I'm looking forward to seeing the house that Jack built.
I was actually, I forgot to say, I was out after Antichrist. That was the last Von Trier I've actually seen. I watched that, and I'm going to watch it again for our next pairing. But I was like, I've seen enough of this guy.
Yeah.
I've seen enough of his ass. I don't need to see anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting that we both have had that reaction to him at different points in his career. It's going to make it fun to cover, I think.
And he would fucking love that, I bet.
I bet he would.
Yeah, there's a comment that he has about Dance in the Dark and people's reaction at Con that we'll talk about next week.
Okay. Jack, what about you and Von Trier? Jack Von Coral here. He just added it to his name.
Tell us your feels. Tell us your feels, Jack.
I can't really dismiss him as being someone that I strongly dislike, because the only thing I'd seen of this prior was like maybe a quarter of the house that Jack built, because everyone was talking that movie up so much when it came out, and I thought it was the worst piece of shit I've ever seen. Just smug, arrogant garbage. And everything that I know about Von Trier with his whole director persona, because every director like has like a character that they're doing.
Yeah,
it's like David Lynch. He knows it's a bit. Yeah. And Von Trier's is just so fucking annoying. I just want to punch him. But that's the problem, is like you're saying like, oh, he would love to hear that. He would love that. Like that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
So on one level, I do appreciate that he gets a reaction out of me, I guess.
But if we go back to 1984, maybe a little different story. Thomas, I want to hear about your experience with Von Trier and the movies, and maybe some of what you find so fascinating about him that you chose him.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what my entry point was. It might have been Dogville, even though
really?
I had heard a lot about Breaking the Waves when it came out, because that's about the time that I became a cinephile. Was in the mid '90s, when I was not born yet. And then The Five Obstructions is one of my favorite creations. It's hard to call it a movie or a film just because of it's kind of limiting what it does and the heart behind it. I guess fairly early on, I watched The Element of Crime and was just blown away. And I enjoy that every film takes a new approach to its material in a way that's kind of like Nolan, but without the budget and without the appeal to all the seats in the theater. So I appreciate that about Von Trier. I think the thing I like best about him, and we'll talk about this, not to keep punting, but a little bit more Dancer in the Dark and the idea of the death penalty, is that he's not really an issues director. He's more concerned about inverting what you would assume is the correct response to his material. Like I think he does a bit of rug pull, which we'll talk about in Element of Crime. Definitely Dance in the Dark. I think his biggest one of those is probably Manderley, where Nicole Kidman goes Clint Eastwood at the end. Which, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to say any more than that.
Now I want to see it.
Yeah.
And that also is in Manderley.
She has a bunch of kids out of wedlock?
That's what the Dogville thing is. That, and she befriends an orangutan. No,
she puts either the orangutan or one of her children in every movie she's made since.
So most of his films are fairly brutal. But I think what's going to be fun is to watch when we watch The Boss of It All for our second pairing. As a little bit of a palate cleanser, to see what it's like to hear that Lars Von Trier is doing a comedy is a bit mind blowing. And with the
aren't there things in his, even the most grimmest of his movies, there's a lot of funny stuff in them.
Well, especially, I mean, what's great about, and you mentioned it earlier, The Kingdom, is that it has this kind of tone of like a Lynch, where there's kind of campy, kooky, funny stuff going on top of this mystery and this really atmosphere, this moody atmosphere, which is why at many nights, whenever that was airing in Denmark, people just did not go out of their house. Like the streets were quiet. It was a phenomenon, and it rightly so. It's a pretty interesting series.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a big fan.
Of the stuff that you've seen, Thomas, how much of it do you really like, and how much of it do you just find interesting because of his because everything he does is a provocation?
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I've not watched all of Epidemic, and I've not watched all of The House That Jack Built, though I've tried multiple times to watch both of those films.
Okay. All right, so you and Jack agree on that.
Some common ground.
Not the titular Jack, though.
Same thing with Nymphomaniac. I've not watched all of it.
Okay, same experience as me then.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of that one.
All right, OnlyFans. So the two films this week, Element of Crime, Dancer in the Dark, they both involve a killer who is brought to justice. And both, a woman is driven to a bus stop. Both have or occur in wet environments. Washington State and the water world of Europa. Both have somebody with diminishing eyesight. I don't know if you know anything about the behind the scenes for the mentor figure, the British actor Esmond Knight, but he was blind.
Oh,
wow.
Wow.
Oh, both have police officers and people driving police cars. Someone near the end of the movie ends up being at the end of a rope.
Oh my God.
Both have murder evidence put in the water. Both have non-standard film colorization. Both have single moms. Both have kids who aren't in school. Coffee drinking. Oh, the best one is they both have dad reveals. In them. So yeah, there's some things in common between these two films.
I have a question before we move on about something you said, Thomas. So Element of Crime is part of the Europa trilogy? So do all of those movies take place in the same like half drowned environment?
They don't.
Okay.
Yeah. They all involve an idea of Europe.
So, interesting.
I remember watching Europa thinking, oh, this is the Element of Crime guy. And then I watch it and I was like,
Epidemic is a bit of metafiction where the word epidemic is always like a watermark on the film, which is infuriating. And it occurs, it has an autopsy scene very similar to Element of Crime, but it occurs as a, talk about humor, Lars Von Trier plays himself and plays a doctor in it. When he plays himself, the script that they had just written is lost on the computer. And so you have this late 80s, the computer broke or is destroyed our whole screenplay. And so they had to make up a movie very quickly. And that movie they make up very quickly is the movie we're watching. About a doctor who's going around trying to cure a pandemic that's actually spreading the pandemic as he goes along.
Wow.
Whatever.
All right, I put some people to sleep.
RFK Jr.'s favorite movie.
So yeah, 1984. We've also covered the movies Repo Man, Tightrope, City Heat,
Boo.
yeah, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Woo.
Good year.
That's a pretty good year. Yeah, it's a pretty good year, and City Heat.
It's a pretty good year and a great book. That's very telling about our times.
Yeah.
1984.
Made for a good Apple commercial too.
Fuck Apple.
And a bad, I think Duran Duran album.
Element of crime.
The element of crime.
Maybe this will put in context for some people. Brazil came out in 1985. And so when I look at the aesthetic of Brazil in this film as like an odd future, I think that kind of contextualizes kind of what was in the zeitgeist at the time.
Ooh,
A few years after Mad Max or The Road
Interesting.
Warrior.
Yeah, this is one of the best depictions of a near, like, pre or like during apocalyptic future I've ever seen in a movie. And it takes a little while to figure out that's what it's doing, or at least it did for me. But I thought the whole thing was quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Radford's 1984 came out the same year.
Yes.
And obviously it's based on Orwell's, but I mean it is very dependent on a monochromatic sepia toned look as well. Not as far as the sodium lighting, whatever the hell they're doing, in an element of crime, but yeah, visually and tonally, they're all kind of a piece that you can make a triple feature right before you kill yourself of the three movies.
Yeah. So
All right.
if the listener hasn't ended their life.
Had
like
any
the
of
guy
you?
in the movie.
So Thomas, you had seen this before. Ryan and Jack, this is your first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
was very surprised at what it was like.
No reactions. We're not there yet.
Okay.
We're not.
All right.
We're like
all right.
25
all
minutes
right.
in. Come on, man. So yeah, I was going to do one of my patented quizzes that everybody loves about this movie, and then the first question was going to be where the title came from, and the first joke answer, and I had like a detailed version of a post-punk band that began before the movie was made, and that's where the inspiration came from. And I had like a whole history of them, and then I looked it up, and this movie inspired a post-punk rock band in Berlin called The Element of Crime. So I completely scrapped it altogether because
Shame.
That's amazing.
the world tends to do that to you.
That's awesome.
I thought it was very interesting and only occasionally a little student filmy, but I thought it was very different from what I expected, having seen his later work. And we can get into it more in next week's conversation. But as a fan of his later work, I felt like Element of Crime was a lot closer to the stuff that, like Antichrist and Melancholia, than most of what I know about of what came in between.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
like
also very surprised by this.
What were you expecting going in?
I wasn't expecting anything because I didn't look at, like, I didn't look this movie up beforehand, and I'd never heard of it before. And I'm what I've gathered is that this is his directorial debut.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, he has a
Um,
lot of shorts beforehand, but
Yes. And this is him wearing pants, so to speak. But yeah, I also, alongside Ryan, I thought a lot of it definitely looked like someone who had studied all of the great masters beforehand of European cinema and was trying to recreate that. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at any point. I think it all works.
Yeah, I mean, riffing on Tarkovsky in 1984, I think feels a lot different than it does in 2024. When we're recording this, it's going to be released in 2025. Maybe at the time, it felt a bit precious how indebted he is to expressionism and Tarkovsky, obviously. But 40 years later, when all that recency is gone, yeah, it's pretty stunning.
Yeah.
it reminded me more than anything else. And I haven't seen much Tarkovsky and a lot of the other things that he might be referencing. But what it really reminded me of was the Chinese film that we've discussed before, Long Day's Journey into Night.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was going to bring that up later.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And I only mentioned the student filmy thing because I think that movie perfectly rides the line of like being abstract and obscure and expressionistic, but never feeling staged. Whereas there were just a few 2 or 3 minute stretches where like he would cut to something here and it just felt really like okay, now we're watching a bunch of his friends run around on a back lot for a couple minutes. But the spell that it cast overall was really exciting to me and felt very fresh.
And I can't even really wrap my head around how technically good the like plot or story of this movie is, because I was looking on letterboxd.com, sponsored, and a lot of the reviews were like, oh, this looks gorgeous and it's shot so well, but the story's really dumb. And I was like, I guess I can kind of see that, especially in the last 20 minutes, but I don't even know if you can technically or if I can technically wrap my head around critiquing the movie for any of that, because I was just so enamored by the mood and the world that it created.
I don't personally. I don't think that's the movie's not asking to be read in that way. It's not like people are wrong for. I don't think anybody's wrong for being upset that it's not like that. But it's like, to me, it's a little bit like Blade Runner or something like that, where you can critique it for that, but the filmmaker is not really interested in it. So,
Oh, I thought for a moment they were going to use the N word and we're going to have to bleep you out.
wow.
No,
maybe there's a different cut of Blade Runner that I ain't seen.
Oh, no. It's a crime story, right? And it's dark.
Noir.
Oh, I see. Noir?
Wow.
I've been practicing, see?
It's pretty good.
It's actually pronounced noir.
I want some mustard on my noir. That's what I've been.
I was curious if the crimes, the lack of, or the liberties taken with a crime story you would have bumped up against it, Ken. Because on the commentary track, which they don't have on my DVD, but if you get the Blu-ray 3-disc Europe trilogy set, which is available through the Multnomah County Library,
Shout out.
there is a commentary track recorded in like 2005, and it's him and the two Toms that he was working with at the time from film school, who helped edit and do production.
Tom Green.
That would make sense. I would love to see an LVT Tom Green collab.
Oh, man. Thomas's head just exploded.
It did. Most of the track is them just clowning on what they had made. Like, they do feel like it does feel a little art student, like, oh, why did we put that light there, that blue light? Did we not have a light meter for this? Is common things they're saying. But the one of the things that they mentioned was that they told somebody that they were working on a crime movie, and they have some crime, I guess, pretty famous crime writers in Norway. And somebody asked them, like, oh, so what's it about? And they're like, oh, we got embarrassed because our story was so basic. Trying to talk about a crime film with somebody who actually writes crime fiction.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I felt like it was a really good, like it said, it reminded me of Long Day's Journey into Night, or like the Paul Auster detective trilogy. It felt like a deconstruction of a detective story in a way that I found tremendously satisfying, where a lot of times something like that might be wanting in that it doesn't capture enough of like the real crime element. But I found that this really got that. I didn't even honestly care about the detective plot because I found it so immersive.
Well, and I think that one of the brilliant things about this film is to have it all be hypnotic flashback.
Yeah.
And so things don't have to make perfect sense because it's his memory. And he even asks a few times, do you believe me that I'm doing this, or that actually happened?
Well, and he's talking to his therapist too. So it's like not even necessarily, the idea that we're relaying a linear story is something I never even worried about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go on, can we say how each of us was able to watch this? Because it was exclusive to Mubi, MUBI, not
Movie.
chest. And
Movie.
I had to do the 7-day free trial in order to watch it because we ran out of options. There's nowhere to watch this thing. You can't
I'm
even
sure
rent
you
it.
could have paid for it. You could have had a subscription to Mubi instead of just doing the free trial.
You know what, Mubi? You have some great movies, but $15 a month,
A bit steep.
that's a bit.
Do we still have that?
We do. We have it until the end of the day.
Until the end of the day?
Well, until early tomorrow morning.
Until next
Anyway.
year.
I got it from Movie Madness, which had it must have been
Shout out.
Yeah, it must have been from that box set that Thomas is talking about because it came in one of those skinny cases. And it had
nice.
2 commentaries on it. So
Whoa.
Wow.
So I own the Criterion Collection on DVD, and like I said, I got the Blu-rays from the library.
So you're a fan?
Of the movie?
Yes.
did you
I mean,
watch?
yeah. Enough that I own it so I could watch it when I need to, or lend it to people who were cheap.
Did you watch the Blu-ray, Thomas?
I did.
Did you sometimes with monochromatic films, there's not a huge jump between the DVD and the Blu-ray. Was it more or less the same, or was it a noticeable uptick in quality?
I didn't watch them close enough together to be able to
Okay.
say.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you've never seen The Element of Crime
And you're listening to
In
this for some
concert.
reason.
or the movie, Thomas, you want to take a stab broadly of what the movie is about? Like
Well,
the plot?
Yeah, I mean, if I could do it in a sentence, that's usually the easiest for me.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Kevin Costner has gills, and this Hopper is a baddie pirate, and there's this promised land where there's actually land, and
Uh-huh.
it was called Fish Tar by some critics.
Gotcha. I have a knock-knock joke for this movie. Why are you sighing?
Yeah, no, I didn't say anything.
Shut up. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Weather in the element of crime.
Weather in the element of crime. Who?
I do not exist. The weather changes, never alters. There are no seasons.
Well, the full quote there is like really contradictory, if I remember right. Right? Because then it
The
says
weather-
like it never changes, but it's always changing.
Yeah.
It's the
yeah.
same every day. It's always changing or something. Like, that's not even like a cone. It's just makes no sense. There's a detective by the name of Fisher. He's played by character actor, an alcoholic, professional drinker, the British Michael Elphick, I think.
And a smoker, I'm guessing, based on his amazing fucking voice.
Yeah.
So we open up with Super 8 or 16, probably 16 millimeter footage, like that they bought from a couple who had gone to the director had bought from, and the Toms had bought from somebody who had gone to Egypt or Morocco or somewhere, and so they use that for the exteriors, and you cut the inside. They did a few color corrections on it to make it look a little bit closer, and they added some more of their own 16 millimeter. But all that's like the first minute of the film. You go inside. Fisher, you find, is back in Egypt, and he's undergoing hypnosis with a therapist who was so large, that the actor, that it took up 3 seats on the airplane to get them to Denmark.
Oh, is that right?
That's right.
Holy shit.
And he has a monkey on his shoulder. That monkey, they only had one take where that monkey wasn't masturbating, and so that's what you see in the film.
That seems like a plus for Von Trier.
Yeah.
So what's amazing about that shot is that it's him. He's hot. Not like sexually hot necessarily, but he is warm because it's Egypt, presumably. You have this wild arabesque background behind him of layers of pattern, and then you have like a person who's just like kind of walking in the background coming in, maybe a nurse or something. It's just there's a depth of field which I haven't really seen since like Frankenheimer that kind of permeates this film.
Uh-huh.
But that's the first few minutes of the film. Basically, Fisher is recounting his last escapade, which is going back to Europe from Egypt to see his old mentor, who's played by, I just said his name, Esmond Knight, who was legally blind, and the actor they had people off camera moving his feet to his marks because he couldn't see where he was going. The
Wow.
sodium lights, and then just not having vision.
Wow.
That if you watch him, it's a pretty interesting performance because there's times where Elphick is like reaching out for the cup because he knows the guy can't see, or if he's handing him a glass or he's handing him things.
Wow.
But yeah, so Fisher is going back to visit his mentor. His mentor has written a book called Element of Crime, who's basically, if you follow back in the footsteps of the person you're pursuing, you can, I guess, ascertain like what might happen next. And there's some murders that are going on, and he ends up finding out that by becoming the murderer, that he's becoming the murderer.
Yeah, the Lotto murderers. Someone's killing young girls selling lottery tickets. Which, okay. I don't understand. I don't understand. All I know is lottery tickets in 2024, where you go to the mini mart and you say, "I'll have a Mega Millions."
Yeah,
are
so
these girls
this is
like
a
on the
land,
street? And
this is a fallen world. It's covered in water. There's weird breezes throughout, which is one of the things that they commented on in the commentary track, just making fun of, because there would be just random breezes through a window as part of a shot, or dust being moved around a table by wind. But yeah, the world's continuously wet, and that's something that follows through into his next film. In Pandemic, there's a lot of water in that as well.
Which is a total Tarkovsky thing. Tarkovsky was super obsessed with water, and he would always have like characters going to sleep in water and it like raining indoors for no reason and stuff.
Yeah, there's that moment where he goes down to the archives to find the trailing report, and he's just like walking in like 10 inches of water.
Yeah,
and there's like a floating thing with a tea kettle and
and that recurring bit of the teacup with the handles
breaking
off.
Yes.
Yeah, this movie's really quite funny, isn't it? No, seriously, there's a lot. There's a
bits,
yeah, there's a lot of little moments like that. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the podcast before. I might have, but for some reason, one of my favorite things in movies, and you know this because after we watched it, you brought it up.
Yes,
is I love it when a protagonist wears a white suit in a movie. I don't know why.
Because you just like, know he's going to go through some fucking shit.
Yeah, there you go. It's going to get covered in blood or something. But yeah, as soon as he shows up in the white suit, I was like, I'm in.
It's like Benny and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Classic.
Warren Oates. So he looks pretty good at the starting of the movie. At the end, that's not a white suit still, is it?
Yeah, it's kind of sad whenever he takes the coat off as well, whenever he's in the room full of bottles. So one of the things I've always puzzled over. So at one point he's found the next potential victim of the Lotto Killer. And so he takes the young girl with him into a warehouse that's full of bottles set on the ground, presumably to trigger, right? To be set off in case the killer comes in. He's going to knock some bottles over and he's going to know that he's there. Presumably. We don't really know why they're there. Might all be a dream. But the Lotto Killer, does anyone remember how he actually kills people? With broken glass from bottles.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like he's giving him all of his weapon, like his armory. He's giving him an arsenal just to go after the young girl with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like luring Hannibal Lecter into a Williams-Sonoma store.
What?
It's a cooking reference.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I understood that reference.
That's the thing that people, and I don't know why I say people. I don't know anyone. All these people on Letterboxd could just be ChatGPT robots or whatever.
That pan scan. Pan scan.
Pan scan. Oh, I'm Stanley Kubrick. Here's a pan scan.
It seems that the thing that divides people the most on this movie is at that point, which was the point where I was like, is that real? I mean, him like, oh, I'm studying the killer, but then I become the killer. Like that seems pretty par for the course for these detective stories, which you've read a lot of. So, I'm so similar to the killer. Oh no.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it even matters at that point in the movie if any of that is actually really even happening.
No, yeah. Do you are you guys, have you heard of I learned of this concept in a sci-fi literature class, but the city of memory as like a literary device?
Yeah.
That's what this
Yeah.
Explain.
So in my vague recollection, it's related to basically a mind palace idea, but in certain types of therapy and in certain types of literature, you might populate something like a city, but it's just built out of your memories and impressions and recollections. So it's not necessarily a stable place that you're creating to tell your story.
We can date underage girls and make things wrap around and then chase your dead wife.
Yes, exactly.
I've seen that movie.
Yes. That's what. So all this stuff about like the rationality of the story, just I never even considered it because it felt very much like we were in a dream, an interrogation of Von Trier's ideas about cinema and women and culture and society, and it wasn't really. Maybe I just missed the boat, but to me, it wasn't really trying to be a gumshoe story. You know,
Totally. I agree with that. And one of the other things I really love in any type of story, whether it be book or film. Thomas, have you seen Long Day's Journey into Night? I can't remember.
I've not.
Okay, so it's like this. You wouldn't call it a subgenre, maybe you would, but the detective who's searching for something desperately, and the more they look, the less and less sense it makes, and the more dreamlike it becomes. And Long Day's Journey into Night is like one of my favorite movies ever, and that's exactly what that movie is he's looking for this woman, and the more he's searching for her, the less everything starts to make sense around him. And as soon as I realized that's what was happening in this movie, I was like, I'm totally on board, because I feel like there aren't enough stories like that for me, because I get so much out of them.
Yeah, that was a great summary of Long Day's Journey, Jack.
Without spoiling anything. Well done.
Yeah. But I felt exactly the same way. As soon as I realized that was kind of the mode, I just sat back and took it all in and enjoyed the immersion, you know?
What's amazing is for this film, if you look, like all the dissolves, all that's manual at the time. This is before Final Cut or any other type of computer software. They're manually bringing in all those images.
It reminded me of a little bit of Guy Madden and strangely Pi, Darren Aronofsky's Pi, just because it was so tactile. It felt like it was an imaginary type world like one might create with computers and using a lot of technology, but it felt very handmade in a really cool way.
Yeah, and practical.
Yeah.
Yeah, so practical that when they were going to get dead horses that were meant to go to the zoo as meat. And the butchers delivered live ones. And they said, we were supposed to get dead horses for the film. And they said, well, it's easier to get them to their spot this way.
Oh, my God.
I did wonder if one of the horses at the beginning was killed on camera.
I don't think any of them were killed on camera, but they did kill some of the horse. They did kill the horses, and which was what was going to happen to them anyway. But still, it seems brutal. And then they also, for a lot of the scenes, they didn't feel like they had enough material, meaning guts and creatures floating. And what the butcher said was, we just cut them in half, and it looked like there's more. Which is what they did.
Wow.
What? Oh, no.
Incredible.
Also, for the raft scene, whenever maybe it's whenever our protagonist is with Mimi Lai.
Yeah.
Her last film. They're in the raft. That raft, and then also I think in the catacombs that you mentioned, Ken, those were in the sewer. So they were
Yeah.
they were in shit and Luba.
Uh,
And then the bungee jumping, which wasn't a thing at the time, like it wasn't. It was just catching on in England, and that what we think of as bungee jumping as a fad in the '90s would take a decade.
Uh-huh.
Those water scenes, one of the extras passed out because they were shooting all that in winter, so it was already cold. Denmark cold, and they're in water, which is basically below freezing.
Oh
Holy
gosh.
shit.
And he didn't know how to wear a wetsuit, so that dude, like, they had to revive him.
He didn't know how to. Don't
He
you
was
just get
wearing
in?
clothes under between his wetsuit and his skin.
Well, that, you know.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that scene on the raft because that came out of nowhere, but I guess it was kind of par for the course, which I keep saying. I don't know why I keep saying par for the course. I've never played golf for the movie at that point, but that was like the most amazing thing I had ever seen in my life. I was like, at this point in the movie, this is just like completely taken me to this dimension where they're on a raft in the sewer having a conversation for some reason.
One of my favorite scenes is that first scene where we're introduced to Mimi Lai, and it goes underneath the bed, the box spring of the bed.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then it's a crane shot descending, and you just see the layers of people.
Yeah, that was a great shot.
Wow.
Yeah. So I first saw this movie, I think, in 1985 or 86.
Wow.
Not long after, I mean, probably right when it came out in video, I probably made my dad drive my brother and I down to Ashland to rent it because I'd read about it. And it wasn't until rewatching it the other night that I realized it's almost like a repressed memory of how much of this movie influenced my entire outlook, like on crime stories and writing and visual aesthetic.
Oh, fascinating.
I before we started watching it, I told Jack I kind of remember the visual aesthetic of this movie because it's very distinct. But then when we started watching it, and all the elements of like a crime story that is also very fluid in what the answers are and how unreliable memory is from your protagonist, an unreliable narrator, and just the sense of being stuck in somebody's memory really stuck with me as much as almost any movie I've maybe ever seen. And I'm not saying this is like the greatest movie ever, but the only other movie that really happened to me with is Wim Wenders' Kings of the Road, where once I saw it, the entire thing, one viewing, was completely sublimated into my subconscious. So I don't know how many more Lars Von Trier movies I will watch, but this is definitely my favorite and had the most impact on my life when I saw it the first time as a very impressionable teenager.
Wow.
So this is like Rosetta Stone for me, and I didn't even realize it till we started watching it.
I think there's images from this film, like especially this shot overhead as you're going through the water, like a tracking shot over a dead horse. And there's something about the depth of how that horse is in the water and the saturation. Just, it's stuck with me my entire life, like Holy Mountain, Jodorowsky's movie, scenes from that. There's just imagery in here that are, without being necessarily disturbing, are unsettling, or I don't know. There's that match cut that's beautiful in the first part of the film after he's met his mentor and the mentor leaves, and he, for whatever reason, the phone's underneath the table, which is something else they laughed at.
As one does.
Track. They're like, they didn't have a longer line. They should get one of those mobiles. He leaves in the hallway, and he hears something. It's a kid, and it's a kid playing with a car, and they use that car transition to match cut to him and his VW Bug, like stopping and basically hitting a wall, like stopping by hitting a wall.
Completely amazing. And the only other movies in my personal life are like Blue Velvet has a similar sense of dream logic to it, while also tethered to a fairly traditional crime plot.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that would be when describing this film's The Market Left on You, Ken, that would be my comparison point would be seeing Blue Velvet for the first time.
Yeah, I mean,
think-
imagine seeing this movie and Blue Velvet within like a couple years of each other and being like a teenager, like 15, 16 years old.
I think Thomas and I are too young to really have something like that.
Well, you're young enough that this could be that moment.
It is.
I think
putting the comparing it to Brazil and then Neuromancer would have come out around the same time, and it also has kind of this dissolving narrative quality. It makes me rethink how this part of the 80s were. It would have been a very exciting time for dark and twisted and sci-fi ideas.
Well, it wouldn't be the easiest movie to watch. In 1985, Lars Von Trier would drive to London to promote it because he doesn't fly. He wins the technical award. It is nominated for the Palme d'Or. But Spielberg, I guess, heard about him, and this is the quote from Spielberg, that interaction. So Spielberg expresses curiosity about The Prodigy, but his telex request for a video copy of the Dane's latest film was ceremoniously ignored. This is what LVT said. If Spielberg wants to steal my ideas, he could do it the hard way and see the film in a theater.
I love him. I'm in.
Oh, Jack's back on board.
Oh, what a dork. Oh, I love it.
Well, I did want to bring up just briefly Michael Haneke, because I think Michael Haneke has a very similar director persona to Lars Von Trier, where he always acts aloof, like he hates the audience and he's just making this movie to take the piss, which we'll talk about with Dancer in the Dark.
Like he
maybe.
hates the audience? This
Um,
isn't a Haneke podcast. Come on, let's go. Let's.
whatever.
Sorry
But
to interrupt.
they both hate Spielberg, apparently, which makes me on board with LVT.
Mm.
Okay.
Wow, that was a long walk. The
How many steps was it? Oh wait, that's next week.
oh, we can count them regularly. Yeah, man, we're gonna sing next week. We should. The
Ryan, you are a singer.
oh yeah,
I am.
Can anyone do a good Björk impression?
No. Podcast
I said
over.
good.
yeah.
That's
Yep.
Wait,
Nope,
Matthew
none of us
Barney
can.
just showed up. He was like,
that was
she
his
here?
mating call. Yeah.
I haven't gotten my palimony or whatever they get. I don't know. Alimony.
Palimony? That's when you're
Palimony?
friends and you split up.
And they give you a horse,
Yes.
spotted horse.
Good stuff.
Oh. Yeah, this is I'm glad I was able to rewatch this, because I may have gone the rest of my life not even knowing I've been subconsciously ripping this off for 40 years. So thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
worth it doing LVT to get to Antichrist for me, but this made it double good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Double good choice.
loved it.
Yeah. And his degradation of his white suit from the beginning to the end. And then he's wearing that stupid fucking cap with the name of the killer he's
No,
trying
it's
to
just
get in the head
it's just
of.
the letters.
It's his initials, right?
Yeah. HG, Harry Gray, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was totally like thinking it was going to Harry Lime it, and Orson Welles would show up.
I really the sepia tone reminded me more than anything of The Third Man.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
For some, and I don't even like that movie, but yeah, the way he went around and talked to everybody, I kept thinking of that.
You don't like The Third Man?
No, I also don't like Citizen Kane.
Jesus, fucking
I love Magnificent
Christ.
Ambersons. Come at me, bro.
What? What is happening on this podcast? Holy Moses!
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'll bump up against a little bit, and then, I mean, we need to talk about Me Too next week with Bjork, but I think Lars von Trier does have a bit of a persona, but I also do think from everybody who talks about him, who works with him, and has known him grow like in his early years, he suffers from a lot of anxiety and phobias, and the only thing that really he seems somewhat normal around. He seems very normal in the sense of like he kayaks and he lives in the suburbs and he has a very ordinary life outside of film. Is when he's in front of like whenever he's actually making a film. Otherwise, he's like overcome later in his life with depression. But he often is just anxious around people, and it's very difficult for him to be around others.
Yeah,
And so I think I think some of that comes out as being drunk at all the awards, as seemingly being flip whenever he just doesn't. Yeah, he's working through some stuff.
Yeah, it's I totally respect that because it's always surprising to me when people expect artists to not be neurodiverse. And then they're shocked when it's like, oh, look at this weirdo out in the world. And it's like, yeah, that's David Lynch. Have you seen his movies? Like, that's a weird guy you're talking about, you know? He is obviously LVT as a character and has leaned into it at times more than at other times, but
maybe to the point of finding comfort at it.
Yeah,
like it's easier to be Lars Von Trier, the provocateur, than the honest, earnest artist trying to, present art to the people. He tends to couch it in an ironic kind of, hey, I'm just pushing your buttons.
Well, and I don't think that's 100% for the first part of his career, especially. I think he was very like people said these like this guy never lies. He's just like the most honest guy, and he feels everything.
That is so Riley was over yesterday and he loves Von Trier. He hadn't seen The Element of Crime, but when I was telling him about it, he brought up The House That Jack Built, and he said for him, he thought that movie was Von Trier was casting himself as this horrible monster, and all of his movies, the meta thing was you come to his movies to see the monster, and you go to watch him at Cannes to see the monster, but I thought that was interesting because in this, he's the investigator and he's trying to figure out his feelings and understand the crime. And is he the killer? And it feels like a very searching narrative. And it feels like House That Jack Built might be the same idea from the opposite vantage point, which is interesting.
Huh.
At least as an idea, if not in execution. I haven't seen it.
Well,
but I
just to clarify,
the opinions expressed,
Just to clarify, the protagonist is the person searching everything else. The actor, Lars Von Trier, plays the schmuck of ages.
Yes.
A hotelier, maybe? Yeah. And he'll play in most of his films a small part for the next few films.
Right on.
Yeah, one of the great debuts of the 1980s that I don't think Von Trier was internationally renowned probably until Breaking the Waves. As far as I remember, Breaking the Waves came out, I was like, oh, that's the guy that did Element of Crime and Europa. Those are the only two I had seen before that. And then Breaking the Waves, when it came out, was kind of a big deal.
Huge, yeah.
It got the Oscar nominations, and Von Trier, that's really when Von Trier became more of a public figure. Because to my mind, he was just like a name who had made a movie that I loved, and then Europa, which, I was a little disappointed in. But Breaking the Waves, he kind of became almost a character, and you kind of knew what you were getting when you would go see one of his movies, especially because he followed that up with two more movies that were fucking depressing as hell about some woman making a sacrifice and then dying.
That's what's
Spoilers.
Spoilers. You must be right, Ken, because I did see Breaking the Waves, but I don't have a huge, strong impression of that film. But my impression of Von Trier was enough that when Dancer of the Dark came out, I was like, I'm not interested in this. I even though I didn't know very much about him, I had a very strong reaction, and I can't say exactly why.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. His wife probably says the same thing.
Well, yeah, I guess the reason that
I'm sorry, Mrs. Von Trier.
Well, he's I think, divorced now, but he had 2 wives. One of them was
Really?
his production manager. So a little bit like
Christopher
Nolan's.
Nolan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Lynch.
Yeah, but I guess the one thing that just to go back to his character, like he has interviews that I've read from a book I checked out through the Montreal Academy Library
Shout out.
Shout out.
from the 80s, and he seems pretty consistent throughout. Like it's not like he just created this whole cloth. If he is doing a persona, then he's been creating it since his mid-20s. So Jack, if you're going to create a persona for yourself,
Start working on it.
now is a good time.
It's
You
why
too, Thomas.
I know. I'm just giving him advice that I'm already taking. Yeah.
Okay.
Lou Reed tried to reckon with this by putting out an album in the early 80s called Growing Up in Public, because he felt he was also an asshole like Von Trier.
But Von Trier's not
and
an
that was his
asshole.
justification.
Lou Reed was a fucking asshole.
Von Trier's public persona is very much an asshole. I don't know
Yeah,
anything
but Lou
about
Reed
that.
was an asshole in private as well, though.
Oh, yeah, I
Von-
think, yeah.
Von
I
Trier
love
is,
Lou Reed. Don't get me wrong. Lou Reed fans don't at me, but yeah, he was a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Lou Reed of Metal Machine Music.
Yes. And Lulu.
The very same.
And the Lester Bangs interviews, which are just incredibly entertaining. Total fuckery on his part.
Well,
Good old
I
Mr.
guess.
The Element of Crime.
Yeah.
Woo, woo. Great movie. Thank you,
Fucking
Thomas.
masterpiece. Maybe Von Trier's best. Spoiler for the next 3.
Oh.
Spoiler for the next 3 Von Triers that we watch.
You haven't seen The Boss of Me yet, have you? The Boss of It All.
I'm so excited for Baby Boss Baby.
I'm so excited for like Antichrist and The Boss of It All, and to like watch more Von Trier's after this, and especially after learning what he said to Steven Spielberg. Well,
Ugh.
I'm in.
All time.
Have you seen that? You haven't seen Melancholia, Jack?
No,
That's a fucking movie. That's a good one.
I
that's what
don't.
I've heard.
Huh. Okay. Well, we could talk about that on our final episode. For now, I want to wake up. Are you there?
Yeah.
Wait, wake
Yeah.
me up.
Oh yeah. One I forgot to say that's one of the best ending shots I've ever seen in anything.
Wait, what?
The final shot of the movie.
Oh,
we
yeah,
talked
yeah.
about.
Okay.
The little creature in the hole. What kind of animal is that? Like a
Ew. It's like was it a marmoset?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that too.
Even some of the art school debut film stuff in this movie. It's just such pure vision to screen brilliance that I don't know. I feel like I'm too close to it. It's like one of those movies I inadvertently watched for the podcast, where usually I say I don't want to watch this movie because I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it's I am very excited to watch it many more times, and I think it's tremendously influential.
Oh yeah.
Delicatessen, like I could just go through the late 80s and rattle off so many movies that I think owe a lot of this.
We're not even talking about how early the serial killer profile motif in 1984 is introduced here. This is like pre-Manhunter.
Yeah, no,
For fuck's sake.
yeah,
And that a lot of that stuff nowadays just looks kind of stupid. It's like, oh, he's a profiler becoming the killer. But it's really steeped in like early crime novels where that's the kind of stuff that detectives would do.
The comparison to Brazil hits for me because I think both of these are imperfect films that are tremendously influential. Like, so you just see them everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with Ryan.
And I can tell you firsthand, because I rewatched about half of it again. Great music for like sound editing or working on your computer. You just look up, there's this beautiful sepia nihilism on screen. Couldn't be a better mood setter.
Gorgeous movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was part 1 of our 2-part Von Trier entryway.
LVT.
Element of Crime, followed next week by Dancer in the Dark. Hey, what's going on in there? I'm dancing, but the lights are off. That's because I'm.
Wow. Can we try this episode again?
Yeah, thanks for Ryan for the theme song.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You can follow us on the social medias. Just subscribe to our podcast.
Yep. You don't have any funny things?
I'm not going to say any funny things this week. It's almost the new year.
Okay. Or if you're listening, it's already the new year. We're in the past. So
I'm gonna change my clothes, my hair, my face.
I can't wait to talk about Dancer in the Dark with you guys next week. I think it'll be a little different than this episode.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, get your A game. We're going to come back.
All right. Dancer in the Dark next week. See you guys.
I'm not talking at you. I'm talking to you. I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear from you. It's 10-4. 10-4, buddies. Destroy. Kill all hippies.
I don't hate it. I just don't know why you're straight from the formula.
You bastards! In case you don't know it, Bob, I'm an artist. And I must reflect that in my rhyme.
Eleanor, I said, what did I say? Okay, we won't be having that problem anymore, if you know what I mean.
Yes, and this is him wearing pants, so to speak.
Oh,
Jesus fucking
Wow.
Christ. It's interesting, the movies.